Hi, and welcome to this episode where we will talk about the cinematic feeling of a photo. A lot of people want to have that kind of cinescope, cinematography feeling in their pictures, but how do we actually achieve that when we are walking the streets with a normal camera? In this case, it is my Leica M9 here. How do we achieve that? Because we can't control everything. We have to rely on what happens. My name is Albek. I'm a professional photographer. I teach at workshops, and be kind to sign up to get a notification each time I have a new video up. Sign up for my newsletter if you want to read more about photography and check out my workshops around Europe in interesting cities. The cinematography look in a picture isn't something that we can just rely on. A lot of different circumstances that we have no control over is what makes the picture look more cinematic than other pictures. And I will look into what kind of circumstances there have to be present to be able to achieve that look, what we can do ourselves, and of course, because that's important, also what we can't control, because we are not cinematographers when we walk the streets with our cameras. We are photographers, and we have to deal with the reality that we can do nothing about, except that we can get up early in the morning if that is needed, or going out late in the evening, or knowing how light reflects from buildings, and knowing something about composition, and knowing something about the narrative feeling in a photography, so we get that cinematic feeling. So let's walk through some of that, and I will show some of my pictures as usual as an inspiration. You might not have the same feeling as I have on all of them, and that's part of photography. We have different views on things, but take this as an inspiration and my personal approach to the subject. One of the absolute key points in get that cinematic look in your pictures is that you are framing the right subject at the right time, so you get that feeling of something that could be a scene in a movie. So if we just take an ordinary scene, like a street photography scene, that could be marvelous in that sense that it captures a moment and an expression, but it is a photography more than it is a cinematic photography. So what do I mean about that? I simply just mean it's not a bad picture because it doesn't look cinematic, but what we're aiming towards today in this video is seeking that look when we can, because we can always try to find something that is interesting, but it might not be cinematic. So if that's what we're going for, then we have to know about light. The first and absolutely most important part of nailing a cinematic feeling in a photo is to have a narrative. There has to be something in there that shows a narrative, a story. So it's about storytelling. What are you showing with that picture? If it is just like capturing a moment of course of interest but without a narrative, then maybe it's not cinematic. And all of this is personal opinions. One will say one thing, another one will say another thing. And if you think about movies, they have a lot of different expressions. There are a lot of different ways to make something cinematic. If you go back to some of the older black and white movies with a lot of depth of field in them, and they are black and white, but they rely heavily on subjects placed in order in the frame accordingly, and with clear lines and clear black and white areas, and of course with all the midtones in between, but everything is aligned and arranged very precisely. As a photographer in the street, we have to wait for that moment to occur and then grab the moment when it's there, but there's no guarantee that you will nail it even if you see the scene, because you have to wait for things to be placed orderly to achieve this feeling. So it's very much about thinking in lines, arrangements of things, and then at the same time have something happening in that scene that makes it interesting, that transcend it into something where your imagination can continue the story, because the difference between a cinematic photo and a real cinema movie is that there things are put together in a narrative telling a story. In a photo, we just have the feeling and have to make the story ourselves. One of the things that clearly separates a snapshot photo in the street and a cinematic photo is the use of light. Light is extremely important to create that cinematic look. And in street photography, you don't really have that control over light. You can seek the light, you can find it, and you can try to take advantage of the light when you see it, where you see it. In a cinematic or a movie recording, you will have everything arranged. It can be outdoors, it can be indoors, but light is controlled with flags, extra light to highlight in the shadows. Everything is controlled, so there is a consistent feeling and a consistent tone throughout the movie and a control of light in the situation. And if you notice it, a lot of movies, you will separate the subject from the background, not just by having a wide open shutter like 1.2:4 on a good lens, but by shooting against the light or having backlight. On me, for example, if I had backlight here, it would separate me more from the background. There would be put up artificial light to light up my shadow side if needed. Some cinematographers rely heavily on natural light, but everything is controlled. In street photography, we have to find the moment, we have to find the place, and then make use of it. But then, if you get that, you get that cinematic feeling. And you may as well notice it. I'm sitting indoor. I have some big windows here in my office at my extra building beside the house, which I use for these videos and as my little private office and man cave. And the light shifts during this movie. And this is actually, or episode, not movie, just too cinematic here. So this just shows you how light changes the mood in a scenery. Right now there was a cloud coming in front of the sun, and that dims down the light, makes it look more flat, less interesting, adding less depth, which just shows you how important light is. In a few minutes that cloud will disappear and we'll have different light again, and this is what we are up against as photographers in the real world where we can't control the light. That's actually a really good scene to show you how it shifts. When walking the streets, I look for light all the time, and it is one of my hottest topics on my workshops, street photo workshops, to show how light impacts a photo and how it can change just within a minute or two, or during the full day, or when we walk around the corner. So one of the lectures at those workshops is to learn light, understand it, and take advantage of it for the best possible outcome on the photography. And if we want that cinematic feeling, we have to know about light and how it impacts. You will often see a good cinematic picture will have a soft light source on the face. Also here there can be different expressions depending on the film and the mood of the film, of course. But in a classic movie you will have that Hollywood style look with soft light in the face, a little from the side, a little from above, and then a shadow side at the other side, and not right now because the natural light here is different, some backlight here to separate from the background. So all of that is controlled in a movie shoot. It is uncontrolled when we are out walking with our cameras in real life, but we can take advantage of it by knowing the light, by noticing it, and then use it when it's possible. And it's not possible all the time. It happens in between, and when you get it, you nail it, and that's great. So light is an important part of nailing that, but you can have all kinds of moods in a cinema. You will have different color tones as well. So the real good cinematic photos that reveals some of that intimacy or some of that mood you see in a movie is also the full color tone. Not just a preset where you can take a little saturation off, which is kind of modern of the time. You can also add some blue if you want that cold tone. You can go the opposite way around, adding more warmth, often orange, also appeals like a cinematic expression. All of that you can do in your post-production in Lightroom or Capture One and get that mood if you want that. It also just can be, for example, in black and white, the tones, the drama in the tones also dictated by the light, and adding contrast and highlights afterwards in post-production. But if the image or the scenery, the way things look, isn't cinematic, then it doesn't help to have a cinematic look in post-production like a preset or filter put on. That will just make it look warmer or cooler or less saturated, but it will not have the cinematic look unless the picture also have that quality. Some movies will have a very clear and very color vibrant tone, and others will have that desaturated look. So it also depends on the mood you like in your pictures and what you're shooting. We have personal preferences of the images we want to present. It can be nature, it can be buildings, it can be parts of towns without people or people at a distance, or it can be people more up close so you see the interaction. All of that also influences on the style you have, and all of this is very personal, so you can go from something that is very subtle and very downtoned to something that is very expressive. And in cinemas, in movies, there will be a clear color tone throughout. Now the light actually changes, you will see what happens. This clearly changed the mood of the scenery in here in my workshop room, in my office. But colors, the tones in a cinema, like I have here in my studio, I have something that is green, I have something that is blue, and that's the major warm tones, like my old table here with brown tones and then a black t-shirt. That is part of the storytelling in this image you're viewing right now. It could be different. It could be a white wall. Everything could be black and white, but still in a color photo, so you only have the skin tone that kind of tells you the mood. It could be very downtoned colors in my clothes as well, or I could have a very colorful shirt on, and that will change the mood. But especially the color palette you choose to photograph dictates how the expression is. So if you watch movies, you will see, like the Amelie movie, I put up just a few shots of that, have a very clear tone and some specific colors that are in every picture. Almost every picture throughout that movie, you have the same colors showing in each scene. This dictates the mood of that movie, specific colors that are arranged clearly for the impact of that movie. And you can do the same, but it will be more difficult in your pictures. But I found a scenery that kind of reminds me of the Amelie movie in Copenhagen, where I took a few shots around a restaurant area near the harbor, and they have some of those colors as well. So that reminded me a little bit about the Amelie movie, and I like that tonality. But if I have to do a full range of pictures that are in that same expression, then I have to find the same colors at other places as well. And now the light changed and the mood changed in this picture as well. Therefore, if you want a specific tone in all your pictures, then use a preset. You can make that yourself. You can drag out some of the reds, add more blue. You can drag up the saturation of green, for example, all of that, and use that for a series of pictures. I have made those presets myself for some of my pictures, and I have them for various series of pictures where I need a specific color palette to make that expression. So that also is a way to create a cinematic look. Another way is to add a certain mood by shooting in a series of pictures, everything with the lens wide open, and with the Summilux 50mm here, I can do that at 1.4, which gives me a very narrow depth of field, which also adds a little kind of a cinematic feeling, but it is not necessary, because if you view the movies, you will have a lot of cinematic feeling in pictures with a very large depth of field, but there everything is arranged accordingly. Everything is placed exactly in a way so they are balancing the picture. Nothing is accidental like it is sometimes when you shoot as a street photographer. What you can do to get closer to that look is to find good sceneries, like Henri Cartier-Bresson did. He found a scene where he could arrange the environment around it, finding a building, a good fence, or something that encapsulated the central view of the scene, and then waited for someone to pop in there, someone to ride by on the bicycle or walk into that area. That's a way to arrange the scenery first and then wait for people to appear. It just demands that you have some patience, are waiting for it to happen, and as in everything else, accept if it fails and then find another scene with a bigger success, or return to that scenery as you sometimes see some photographers do. You will see the same place like train stations, and still the images, they have the same tonality, they have the same expression, but always something different is happening in there. So you can find such a scene and then wait for it and make that cinematic look in that place. Another way to get more kind of an organic feeling of your picture, so they do not look that digital, that most camera produce very digital pictures because they are digital cameras. And if you want that a little bit more film-like feeling, you can achieve that by adding a little bit of grain in post-production, like in Lightroom or Capture One. Add a little grain, but be careful with it. Don't overdo it. I just use it with a little bit of grain to give it that feeling, and it actually changes a lot, but keep it fine and not overdo it, because it is just that slightly little thing that actually lifts it from being digital to something more film-like. Overdoing it will cross the picture and it begins to look artificial instead. And especially if you have shot something in full daylight, it will look odd if the grains are very big and very rough. That kind of fits more a night scene if you want to add that feeling of something shot on a high ISO film, but on digital, where everything is crossed nowadays. And I know people are using all kinds of tricks to remove noise in the pictures, but I actually find that is part of the cinematic feeling, that you have a little bit of that grainy or noisy look in your pictures. It makes them look a little bit more organic and real. Other parts making your pictures look more cinematic is the way things are ordered within the frame. So using the rule of thirds is important here. I sometimes talk about forgetting the rule of thirds and just rely on your sense of balance and feeling of the picture. But if you want the cinematic feeling, the traditional cinematic feeling, then use the rule of thirds and place things accordingly so it looks controlled and precise and not left-handed, so to speak. So I sometimes talk about just shooting and forgetting about straight lines, and vertical lines are precise, and things doesn't have to be in the rule of thirds to balance the picture. But for the more cinematic look, they actually have to, else you kind of dismiss that feeling of the cinematic classic look. And that's often what people are seeking when they talk cinematic feeling in a picture. So you can find a lot of different movies that do not rely on that. But if you want the classic look, that's the way to go. So place the things in line and order and in rule of thirds, and that will help you to give you that cinematic look. If light, if composition, if the narrative also is present. Also, negative space is part of the cinematic feeling. So if you have negative space and a person balanced at the other side in the rule of thirds, then you also help having that feeling of a cinematic look, because overloading a photo with information is actually going against the cinematic look. And you will always find exceptions. You can always find a shoot where you say, okay, here there's a lot of things going on, because that's part of the storytelling. But the classic cinematic look is actually about cleaning up the image and having a basic feeling and a very simple feeling, but with a lot of beauty in it. And you can discuss this endlessly in the comments afterwards. Feel free to do that, because there are so many layers and aspects of what is a cinematic feeling. But just try to narrow it into something that everybody can hopefully understand and use to find their own expression and get closer to that cinematic feeling. And of course, you can, if you want to give it a little more cinematic feeling, shoot it in widescreen 16:9, or even more anamorphic or very widescreen like, if you find that suits your picture as well. You can also use older lenses to give it a different tonality and a different expression. But the main thing here is that light, framing and narrative should be present, and then a good clear color tonality. It's possible to find cinematic LUTs or cinematic presets to add to your pictures, but if they do not have the right light, the right composition and narrative, it doesn't matter how many presets you put on top of the picture, it will not have that cinematic look if not all of the elements are fulfilled. Now that was a bit about creating a cinematic look, and if you feel inspired for that, then go for it. But don't be disappointed if you don't succeed every time, because it demands that you are using the light when it is best. In the morning or late in the afternoon will be good times where the sun isn't high on the heaven and make very harsh shadows. Or if it is, then use bouncing light from different surfaces in the street to help you create that moment. And that can change, as it have done today, with the sun going behind a cloud, or rather the cloud going in front of the sun and then disappear again. This changed the mood in this scenery all the time, and I hope you found that educational as well. Please comment after the video if you have any comments of interest, or just discuss what cinematic feelings is to you in the photography. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.